Hello, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Creating a Discord bot with Python using Hikari. In today's episode, we will be looking at how we could use Hikari to create a logging system for our bot. So, whenever someone sends a message in the server, we could log that message to a SQL table and refer back to it whenever we want to, irrelevant of the fact that someone deletes the message later on. Now this video is going to be pretty simple, but we will be using SQL. So your knowledge of SQL would be really helpful for this video, but if you do not have any, don't worry. I'm going to take you step by step through all of that. So let's quickly hop on to our Visual Studio Code. So I have already wrote the initial code and set up the bot, and let's just see what has already been done. So we've imported Hikari right here, then we've imported Lightbulb. These are the two libraries that we're using to initialize our bot and create the bot. Then from the file secret.py I have imported the token. The token is your unique key to your bot. Uh, to run your bot you need a token, that's this. Then I've initialized the bot already using Lightbulb, and I've written the parameters for initializing the bot. And then I've also imported SQLite3 and datetime. For using the logging system, we'll be using SQLite3 because it is a more convenient and a faster method to use SQL with Python. So now, what is the first step that we need to do? First of all, we need to initialize SQLite3. So how do we do that? First of all, we need to ensure that a database is created and we are connected to that database. And then we need to create a table in that database to put all of our records in it. So let's begin with creating a database and connecting to it. So I'll be using try and except blocks for all of this so that my bot doesn't break in case anything goes wrong. So let's write try SQLite connection equals to SQLite3 dot connect. That's wrong. Dot connect, and then parentheses, and in this parentheses we'll write the name of our database. That would be SQLite underscore Python dot db. Now this could be anything that you want. I'm going with this name. You could keep it whatever you want. Then we'll create a cursor, which would be SQLite connection dot cursor parentheses. So this is our cursor, and then we'll print. So this is basically a message that comes in our terminal just to make sure that this step is done and we are good to go. Then we'll write an SQLite query, SQLite underscore select underscore query, which would be select. What this does is this will basically give us the version of SQLite that we're using, and then we'll execute this. So that would be cursor dot execute, and then in our parentheses, obviously we'll write SQLite select query. That's done, and then we'll create a record equals cursor dot fetch all. So we're basically reading what has already been executed now, and then we'll print another statement. Once again, this is for our own use. we know the version would be in record, and that's good. Then we can just simply close our cursor, so that would be cursor.close and a parentheses. That's it. So our try block is complete. Let's create the except block. So we'll write except. So when is there an exception? Whenever there is an error. So we'll write SQLite3 dot error as error. So whenever SQLite3 gives an error in the try block, we'll jump to except block. And what do we want to be? We want we want SQLite3 to tell us what the error is without breaking the program. So we'll just print error while connect connecting to SQLite, and then we'll just throw in the error. I will actually do this as well, so it is differentiated, and that's it. We have initialized our SQLite database, and it is if there was a database, it is connected, or if there wasn't a database, it was created and then we are connected to it. And we have fetched the version of that database, a version of the SQLite that we're using, and if an error arises while doing that, without breaking our code, we could just get that error code, right? So now that we have created the database, let's create table inside that database. So I'll use try block again, and I will write a query to create a database. So that would be SQLite underscore create underscore table underscore query. Now this is my choice of the variable name. It could be anything that you like. I'm using this because it's more direct and easy to understand what's going on with this in case someone who doesn't know about it uses it. Anyways, let's go ahead and write our query. That would be create table and then the name of table. So our table would be um, log. Actually, let's write message underscore log. So that would be the name of our table. And then we need to create the fields in this table. So now here comes an interesting and a tricky part, I would say. So we'll write the name of our field. So first of all, we need a guild ID to know in which particular server the message came. If your bot is running in multiple servers, you need to know which server the message came in. So we'll write that. Guild ID would be an integer and it would be not null. Then we have also I'll add a semicolon at first in case I forget it later on, right? Then we have channel ID. This is also an integer. This is the ID of the channel in which the particular message came. This also cannot be null, so not null. Then what do we have? We have the ID of the user that sent a message. So we'll write user ID, which again comes in the form of an integer and cannot be null if a message is sent. Next thing we have is the message that has been sent. Now message is basically a string, so we'll write text, which also cannot be null because if the message is null, there's no point of logging it, right? And the last thing that we need in this table is date so that we know when exactly the message was sent. So use that also is a string, so we'll use text and write not null. So if any of these by chance become null or do not have any values, our table would not be able to accept logs, so we don't have any unnecessary logs in it, right? So we have created the table query, and then let's go ahead and create the table. So we'll create a cursor again because we closed the cursor in our last query. So we'll write cursor equal SQLite connection dot cursor and parentheses, and then we'll execute it. Before that, let's quickly print successfully connected, just so we know that this step was done in case an error arises. Then we'll execute it. So we'll write cursor dot execute, um, and then we'll write our query, which is SQLite create table query, and then we'll commit it. So that would be SQLite connection dot commit. What this does is this will commit it to the table, to the database, and once that is done, we can print. We can print that table was created successfully, and we can once again close our cursor. Sorry guys, my bad. And done. Now once again the except block would come, which would be the same as this, so I'll quickly just copy it because we only need to know what error is arising. So we'll change it to error while creating a table, just so we know that error is related to this block of try and not the other one. And when we are done, we'll write finally, which is also a part of the try except block, which is try except finally. And after everything is done, what do we want to happen finally? We want if SQLite connection. So if the SQLite connection is true, what do we want? We want it to close. So we'll write SQLite connection dot close, and then we can just print out our message once again for our own reference. That can be SQLite connection is closed. So far, let's review what we have done. First of all, we created a database and connected to a database. If there was no database, we created it. If there was an already existing database, we connected to it, right? We did that, and if an error arises in it in trying to connect with it, we have a fallback method that would print the error without breaking our code, without giving us a traceback error. And then we created a table inside the database that we connected to. We wrote a query to create a table and added fields to it and the type of data that we're taking in those fields, and then we executed that. And if an error arises while creating the table, we get an error message without breaking our code. And what and let's see what error could there be. Suppose you have already run this code once and you already have a database and a table, and you stop the code and run it again. You would get an error while trying to create a table. Why? Because the table already exists. So that's why our code could break If that is the case, that's why we are using a try and except block so the code doesn't break. And if there's an error, we get the error out. And finally, when all this is done, we want our SQLite connection to close. So we have a block of code that says if SQLite connection, which means if SQLite connection is true. So that means if SQLite connection is open, what do we want it to do? We want it to close the SQLite connections. We write SQLite connection.close, which is a inbuilt function. It closes the connection, and then we are having a message printed to us to let us know that the connection is closed. All right. So now let's create a logging function. Now this is the fun part, really. So first of all, we'll write the event decorator as always. So we'll write bot.listen, and what event do we want the bot to listen to? We want it to listen to Hikari.guild message create event, right? Whenever a message is sent in the guild, we want the bot to be listening and logging it. So we'll use guild message create event. If you want the bot to log messages sent in the DM, you will create a DM message create event. If you want the bot to log all of the messages created, you will use just a message create event, but you will have to change the fields that we created in the table, because sometimes in DM messages you won't not sometimes, well, in DM messages, you don't have a guild ID, you don't have a channel ID. There's only a user ID and the message. So you'll have to hit around and see what works the best for you and change the code of the table. If you want like to create different types of logs, you will make changes in the table and so on and so forth. Anyways, back to what we were doing. We are creating a bot listen function. We've done that. Then we'll write an async def create log and then event. Yep, so we have created a function that is create log. What do we want the function to do? We want it to take the parts of message from event and use them to create our log data and log it to the table. So first of all, we'll take all the fields that we have created here, and uh, we'll parse the data from the event and get data for each of these fields. So let's begin with guild ID. I'll write guild ID equals event dot guild underscore ID. This message gives the guild ID of the event. Here our event is basically the message that has been sent. Channel ID equals event dot channel underscore ID. Then we'll create a user. User is event dot author underscore ID. Then we want the message. Now let's quickly convert message into string and write whatever that is event dot content. And the last thing that we need is date. So we are not picking it directly up from the bot, from the event. Instead, we have already imported the date and time module. So what we'll do is we'll use that. We'll use date time dot date time dot sorry, that would be a dot now and a parentheses. So we have the date and time of the exact moment when this message has been sent to us, and we'll use that to basically use in our log. What do we want next? See, so we are logging the messages. Now, messages could be sent by bots, by humans, by embeds, by so many things. But we only want to log the messages that have been sent by users. So we'll write a simple conditional statement. We'll write if event dot is underscore human. What this does is, if the message is sent by a user, a human user, then only the next block of code would run. And what do we want in the next block of code? We want our try and except statements again to send out queries that are basically adding records to the table that we just created. We want it to go try SQLite connection equals SQLite3 dot connect, and then the name of our database, that was SQLite underscore python.db. Okay, this should be in a string form first of all, so I did not do that. I'll do that now. Next thing, we have created our SQLite connection. Next thing we need to do, we need to create our cursor. So our cursor, if you could remember it, it is SQLite connection dot cursor. What do we want next? We want to print tell us that we are connected successfully. Now we are connected to our database. Now let's quickly um, write a query to insert all of this data into the table. So what do we want to write? We want to write an SQL query, so we'll write SQLite underscore query, and this query would be, sorry, I just like when it is indented at the proper place. It looks neat, right? Insert into, now the name of our table. Let's quickly check up what the name of table was. The name of the table that we created was message underscore log. So we'll write insert into message underscore log, and then we are writing the fields that we want to insert into. So the fields that we created were guild ID, channel ID, user ID, message, and date. So these are all the fields that we'll be entering our records into, and then we'll write the values for these records. uh, Values, since we will be using all of these variables to insert here, we would write values equal question mark comma question mark comma question mark question mark comma question mark 5 times, because we have 5 fields to fill. So we'll write 5 question marks separated by commas each, and then we are done with this. Next, we'll create a new variable that would be data underscore tuple. We'll create a tuple, and we would insert all of these in that tuple. So we'll write guild ID, comma, channel ID, comma, user, uh-huh. And actually this should be user ID, because it is ID and not like the name of the user. So that would be a more appropriate name. Then we'll write message and date. So this data tuple has all of these values that we have picked up from our event. And what we are going to do next is we'll execute our query, but this time it would be a little different, so watch out. We'll use cursor.execute, right? SQL insert record query, comma, data tuple. Because these two go together, what this would do is all the question marks here, it would be filled by this data tuple. Alright, then we'll just hit an enter and then we'll commit this. So we'll do that and then we can print a message to us that could say something like records inserted into the table, and then we could write cursor dot row count, right? All right, and then at last we have to close our cursor. Let's create an except block, so we'll write except, and we all know it's gonna be the same, so I'm gonna copy this from right here, and we are also gonna use finally, so I'll copy that as well. Sorry, I'll take that from here. So instead of this, I'll hit an enter and do this. Now obviously indentation problem, so I'll hit tab and tab, and that is done. We'll just change this message once again to error while. So what, let's once again go back and review what this function does. So first of all, we are listening whenever a message is sent on a server, and then there's a create log event, a create log function which works when that event triggers it, and that function basically takes the guild ID from the event, then channel ID from the event again, then the user ID, which would be the author ID of the message. Then it takes the message as a string and date and time, which already is a string. It takes that, and if this particular event is sent by a human, then we go ahead and run our try except finally blocks. Or the try block, what it does is it basically sends a query to insert the records into the table, but this query is a little different than your standard query because it is using parameters that are external to it. So we have a data tuple which basically contains all the parameters that we are inserting from an external point, and then we are executing this query and committing it, and if it is all successful, we'll get a message that records inserted into the table in our own terminal for our own sake. And if there's an error, we'll get an error message without breaking any of our code, without breaking the bot. And finally, when everything is done, whether there's an error, whether there's not, whether the function happened properly, we would close our SQLite connection. So the code is done. Let's quickly run and check this. So I'll hit Control S to save this, and then I could hit run. You can see everything is running fine. We have got successfully connected, which comes from, we have got database connected, created and connected successfully. Then we've got the version of our SQLite database. Then where is this successfully connected from? Then we have got a query that um, our cursor is connected successfully. Then we have then we have a message that the table has been created successfully. Then our connection has been closed when everything is done. And if you look right here, we have an SQLite python.db right here, which let's open it and see what happened. What there is, we have a table inside this database that says guild ID, channel ID, user ID, message, and date. So let's do one thing. Let's quickly go to our bot, to our server, and type something. So let's write hello core. If you look at this, we are getting messages that says connected successfully, record inserted into the table 1, uh, SQLite connection is closed. So this means that our entire code ran successfully. Let's see what happened in our database. We close that and open it up again. SQLite viewer. So you could see in this particular guild, the guild ID for which is this, a channel in whose ID is this, a user whose ID is this, that is me, and the message is hello core, and that says how are you. These are the messages that I sent, and this is the date and time of the message. If you could see that, so that's the date, then that's the time up to milliseconds. So we have successfully created a logging function for our bot through which we could log virtually all the messages that are sent in our server in any of the channels. I hope you like this video, and if there are any doubts, you could comment them to me. I will leave the link to my help server. You could join that and leave your queries over there. And my request to you would be to experiment with it. Try different queries. Try to log different things, and just experiment with it rather than copying this code. Experiment with it. I'll also leave the link to the GitHub repository for this series and for this episode in particular, so you could reference this piece of code if you need it. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.